today's session we are going to continue with our topic of transport, and as in the previous session we discussed about the active transport, today we are going to continue with the mass flow. By definition, mass flow is the back movement of materials from one point to another as a result of pressure difference between the 2 points. And in terms of examples, we have the movement of water and dissolved mineral salts in plants. These are moving through xylem and phloem tissues. For example, in water and mineral salts, they are moving through xylem tissues, but the manufactured food, they are moving through phloem from the leaves to other parts of the plant. So this is one among the examples of mass flow. Also, blood circulation in animals, they are mass flow, and the movement of food and water in the alimentary canal, it is mass flow. Also, the movement of lymph in the lymphatic circulation. So, back movement of materials from one point to another is what you can call the mass flow. Now here, just marks the end of our different methods of transport, and we can have a few study questions, and then later we'll study about the differences between these methods of transportation before we are starting discussing about the transportation in plants. For example, if you are asked, explain why it is important that active transport is employed in the absorption of the end product of digestion. Why it is important? Now the reason behind, how we explained earlier, that firstly, when the concentration of food in the intestine is high, or the concentration of end product of food in the intestine is high as compared with the concentration of end product of food in the blood, the type of movement which is applied is simply diffusion. Why? It is because the diffusion facilitates the movement of materials from the high concentration to the low concentration. But now, if it reaches the point where the concentration of food particles in the blood exceeds the concentration in the intestine, that means we must use active transport to move the materials against their concentration gradient from their low concentration in the intestine to the high concentration in the blood. So we are saying first, it ensures that even if the soluble food molecules are in concentration lower than those already in the blood, they will still pass into blood. And the second point, we are saying that active transport is more effective compared to passive transport, since it ensures that no end products are left. So these are the two major advantages of applying the active transport in the absorption of end product of food. Again, we have the second question. For example, if you are asked, suggest the advantage of using active transport in the absorption of monosaccharides, dipeptides, and amino acids. The question is the same with the first one. So the advantages or the points for the question will remain the same. However, the modality of asking the question is different. So the first question was just asking about the end product of food, but here is you have given the end product monosaccharides, the dipeptides, and amino acids. They are end product of digestion of carbohydrates and protein. In fat, we don't have the active transport because the absorption of fat and the transportation of fat is different from the absorption and transportation of proteins and carbohydrates, because in carbohydrates and the protein we are absorbing the food into blood circulation, while in the fat we are absorbing the end product. Then we are accumulating them into chloromicrons. From there we are taking them in lymph to the thoracic duct where they enter the vein. Then they can be transported to the liver. Question 3. Explain the following observation. First, when potassium ions are removed from the medium surrounding red blood cells, entry of sodium into the cell and exit of potassium increase dramatically. Explain this phenomenon. When potassium ions are removed from the medium surrounding the red blood cell, that means potassium ions outside the red blood cell, they are removed, then the entry of sodium into the cell and the exit of potassium increase dramatically. Now, as we know, the phenomenon of the sodium-potassium pump tend to pump sodium from inside of the cell to outside. And sodium-potassium pump tend to pump sodium outside of the cell and potassium into the cell. So changing in the environmental concentration of ions tend to activate this pump, as I we shall discuss later. And the second question, if ATP is introduced into the cell, the exit of sodium is stimulated. If ATP is introduced into the cell, the exit of sodium is stimulated. Now let's move to the next page and let's see the suggested solution for these questions, and then we will continue with the other parts of this topic of transportation. Now for the first question, a sodium potassium pump operates whereby pumping out of sodium is linked to pumping in of potassium. Without potassium, no pumping out of sodium can occur. So sodium accumulates within the cell by diffusion, and potassium leaves the cell by diffusion. So even if it's not a sodium potassium pump which pump, but due to lack of these ions, that means the ions will just move by diffusion. From there, for the second question, ATP is the source of energy for the active transport of sodium ions. So in the case of ATP, if you introduce the ATP into the cell, that means they will activate the active transport of ions. Now there are some differences. Some mass flow systems of animals and plants. For example, here we have mass flow system, material moved, and the driving force. In a vascular system, in plants, xylem and phloem. As xylem, we are moving mainly water and mineral salts, while here we are using the force which is transportational pull and root pressure. In the phloem, mainly organic food such as sucrose, and the driving force is active transport and osmosis. Then in animals, you have alimentary canal, food and water. Then the driving force, you have muscles of the alimentary canal. In the respiratory system, we have air and water. Then here we have respiratory muscles. In the blood circulation system, we are moving blood, and the driving force, we have the heart or contractile blood vessels. Then we have lymphatic system, the material moved is lymph, and then driving force, we have the general muscular activity in the body tend to move the lymph. Movement of substances through plants. There are different substances which can move in a plant. For example, here we may have a substance or material. We have water, we have solid, we have gases. For example, in water, uptake involves osmosis into roots. Then transport is by mass flow through xylem, and elimination is through transpilation or sometimes glutation through cuticles or lenticles in the leaves. Then, for example, if we are talking of solutes, sodium and other minerals in the plants, they are uptake through diffusion or active transport into the roots. They uptake solutes, which are mineral salts, through either diffusion or active transport, and their transportation is through xylem or phloem. The transportation must flow through xylem or phloem. And then in terms of elimination, is in the shedding of leaves, bark, fruits, and seeds. Also, other retained until death or passed to next generation in a number of seeds. So some of the ions, they remain in the number of seeds and they are passed to the next generation. If we're talking of gases, they are taken up by diffusion through stomata, lenticles, and other parts. Then their movement or transportation is diffusion through intercellular spaces, and then the remover gases through stomata, lenticles, or epidermis. So the removal gases is also through the lenticles, stomata, or epidermis. So in the next session, we will start our discussion about the transportation plant. We have already discussed about the introduction to transportation and different methods which are used in transportation. So in the next session, just stay tuned. We'll start the session on the transportation plant. So just stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe the channel for more updates. If you want the notes, you just go to Kipaji app, then you can buy the notes and you can use them Thank you everybody, and let me wish you nice studies. Thank you.